Mila Rodriguez had been working double shifts at Rosie's diner for 3 years, barely scraping by on tips and her minimum wage salary. The rain was pounding against the windows that stormy Tuesday night when she heard the faint whimpering outside the kitchen door. What she found huddled against the dumpster was a tiny golden retriever puppy, soaked to the bone and shaking uncontrollably. She had no idea that this single act of compassion would lead to her receiving the keys to a brand new veterinary clinic worth millions of dollars, or that the mysterious man who would appear the next morning carried a grief so profound it had changed him completely. But sometimes, the smallest gestures create the biggest ripples, and sometimes, a broken heart finds healing in the most unexpected places. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner buzzed overhead as Mila wiped down the last table of her shift, their harsh glare reflecting off the rain-streaked windows that lined the front wall of the establishment. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, the same pair she'd been wearing for 8 months because new ones weren't in the budget. Her uniform, a faded pink dress with roses embroidered on the pocket, smelled like grease and coffee, the permanent perfume of every diner worker in America. The storm outside had been raging for hours, keeping most customers away and leaving her with meager tips for the night, barely enough to cover her bus fare home and a small grocery run if she was lucky. At 26, Mila had dreams that extended far beyond this small-town diner in Cedar Falls, Montana. But those dreams felt increasingly distant with each passing month of financial struggle. She had moved to Cedar Falls 3 years ago after her mother's death, seeking a fresh start in a place where nobody knew her story. Her mother had been a single parent who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, and Mila had inherited both her work ethic and her compassionate heart. The difference was that her mother had always believed better things were coming, while Mila had begun to wonder if this was simply her lot in life. Cedar Falls was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where the same families had lived for generations, and where newcomers were viewed with polite suspicion until they proved themselves worthy of acceptance. Mila had earned her place through consistent kindness and reliable service, but she still felt like an outsider looking in. The other waitresses had husbands or boyfriends to help with expenses, or family money to fall back on. Mila had only herself, and some days that felt like more burden than strength. As she gathered the dirty dishes from table 6, the one by the window where old Mr. Henderson sat every Tuesday night to eat his meatloaf and complain about the weather, a sound caught her attention over the drumming of rain against the glass. It was faint, almost lost in the storm, but unmistakably the cry of an animal in distress. Mila paused, her hands still gripping the coffee-stained plates, straining to listen over the ambient noise of the diner's ancient heating system and the steady percussion of the storm. There it was again, a high-pitched whimpering that seemed to cut through all other sounds and go straight to her heart. The sound transported her back to childhood, to the countless times she had rescued injured birds, stray cats, and abandoned puppies despite her mother's protests that they couldn't afford to feed another mouth. Her mother used to say that Mila had been born with her heart on the outside, too tender for the harsh realities of the world, but unable to ignore suffering when she encountered it. It was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness, this inability to walk past a creature in need. "You heading out, honey?" called Rosa, the night manager, from behind the counter where she was counting the day's meager receipts. Rosa Martinez had been running the diner for 15 years, ever since the original Rosie had retired to Florida, and had watched Mila grow from a nervous college student into one of her most reliable waitresses. Rosa was a large woman with graying hair pulled back in a perpetual bun, and hands that could flip pancakes and comfort broken hearts with equal skill. She had taken Mila under her wing from day one, recognizing a kindred spirit in someone who worked hard and asked for little in return. "In a minute," Mila replied, setting down the dishes and moving toward the back door. "I think there's an animal outside." Rosa looked up from her counting, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to knowing concern. She had witnessed Mila's rescue missions before, had seen her arrive at work with bandaged fingers from helping injured cats, had watched her spend her lunch breaks feeding stray dogs behind the diner. "Mila, sweetheart, you know you can't save them all. but Mila was already moving toward the kitchen, her heart racing with the familiar mixture of anxiety and determination that accompanied every rescue attempt. The whimpering grew louder as she approached the back door, a heavy steel barrier that separated the warm, bright world of the diner from the dark, wet alley behind it. Without hesitation, she pushed open the door, and the full force of the storm hit her like a physical blow. Rain immediately soaked through her thin uniform as she stepped into the alley behind the diner, the cold water shocking her system and making her gasp. The wind whipped her long black hair across her face, and she had to push it back with both hands to see clearly. The alley was a narrow strip of cracked concrete between the diner and the auto parts store next door, lit by a single streetlight that cast eerie shadows between the dumpsters and storage containers that lined the walls. The smell hit her first, the distinctive odor of wet fur and fear that any animal lover recognizes instantly. Then she saw it, and her heart nearly broke at the sight. Huddled against the brick wall near the dumpster was a small bundle of golden fur, barely visible in the dim light, pressed as close to the building as possible in a futile attempt to escape the rain. The puppy couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old, its tiny body trembling violently from cold and fear, its coat matted and dark with water. As Mila approached, she could see that the puppy was severely undernourished, its ribs visible through its wet fur, its eyes too large for its gaunt face. Those eyes, wide with terror and exhaustion, reflected the streetlight as the little creature looked up at her with an expression that seemed to contain both desperate hope and resigned acceptance of whatever fate awaited it. This was not a puppy that had been lost for just a few hours. This was an animal that had been struggling to survive for days, maybe longer. "Oh, you poor baby," Mila whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm as she crouched down despite the rain soaking through her clothes and chilling her to the bone. The puppy didn't run as she approached, too weak and frightened to move, but she could see its muscles tense, as if preparing to flee if necessary. When she gently extended her hand, palm up, the puppy sniffed cautiously, its tiny black nose twitching as it tried to determine whether this human represented safety or danger. The moment of trust, when the puppy allowed her to touch its head, was magical despite the miserable conditions. The little creature was so cold that Mila could feel the chill through its wet fur, and when she gently scooped it up, she was shocked by how light it was, how fragile and insubstantial in her arms. The puppy immediately pressed against her warmth, its shivering subsiding slightly as it burrowed into her uniform, seeking the heat and comfort it had been denied for too long. Back inside the diner, Rosa took one look at the bedraggled puppy in Mila's arms and shook her head with a mixture of exasperation and affection that spoke to years of similar encounters. The warm air of the diner felt almost tropical after the storm outside, and Mila could see steam rising from her wet clothes as her body temperature began to normalize. "Girl, you can't save every stray that wanders by," Rosa said, but her tone was gentle, understanding. "You can barely afford to feed yourself, and winter's coming early this year. Veterinary bills alone will eat out the month's wages." It was true, and Mila knew it better than anyone. Her studio apartment barely qualified as livable, with a leaky ceiling that required strategically placed buckets during rainstorms, a heater that worked sporadically and left her shivering under multiple blankets on the coldest nights, and windows that let in drafts no matter how much weather stripping she applied. Her bank account hovered dangerously close to empty most months, a precarious balance maintained through careful budgeting and frequent sacrifices. She often chose between groceries and utilities, had become an expert at stretching meals and finding creative ways to stay warm without running up her heating bill. But looking down at the puppy's trusting eyes, feeling the way it relaxed in her arms as warmth returned to its tiny body, she knew she couldn't abandon it to the storm. This wasn't a conscious decision so much as an instinctive response, the same impulse that had led her to rescue countless animals throughout her life, often at great personal cost. "I'll figure something out," she said, wrapping the puppy in her spare apron, the clean one she kept in her locker for particularly messy shifts. "I can't just leave him out there to die." Rosa sighed, recognizing the determination in Mila's voice that meant argument was futile. She had seen this look before, had learned that when Mila set her mind to helping an animal, nothing could dissuade her. "At least let me give you some leftover soup to take home. That puppy needs food, and so do you." The drive home through the storm was treacherous, the roads slick with rain and debris. But the puppy slept peacefully in the passenger seat of Mila's ancient Honda Civic, finally warm and safe after its ordeal. Mila drove slowly, taking extra care at intersections and around curves, protecting her precious cargo as if it were made of spun glass. The radio played softly, classical music that seemed to soothe the sleeping puppy, and Mila found herself talking to the little creature as she navigated the empty streets. "We're going to get you all fixed up," she promised, her voice soft in the darkness of the car. "I don't have much, but whatever I have, I'll share with you. That's what you do for family, and your family now, whether you know it or not." Her apartment building was a converted house from the 1940, divided into 4 units that barely met modern housing standards. Mila's studio was on the 2nd floor, up a narrow staircase that creaked with every step, accessible through a door that required precisely the right combination of key turning and shoulder pressure to open. The apartment itself was roughly the size of a large hotel room, with a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a main living space that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room, depending on the time of day. But it was warm and dry, and to the puppy, it must have seemed like paradise after the cold, wet alley. Mila's apartment felt even smaller with another living creature in it, but she quickly set up a makeshift bed, using her softest towels and a cardboard box she had been saving for her next move, whenever that might pay. She filled a small bowl with water, using one of her 2 good dishes, and searched her cupboards for something appropriate for a puppy to eat. Her food stores were limited, consisting mainly of generic brand pasta, canned soup, and the basic staples that stretched her grocery budget as far as possible. But she had 1 can of tuna, decent quality stuff that she had been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive, and she opened it without hesitation. The puppy needed protein more than she needed a fancy dinner, and watching the little creature eat hungrily made the sacrifice feel not just worthwhile, but necessary. As the little golden retriever ate with the desperate enthusiasm of the truly hungry, Mila examined him more closely under the better lighting of her apartment. Despite his ordeal, he appeared to be a purebred, with beautiful markings and intelligent eyes that suggested good breeding and careful selection. His coat, beneath the matted mess caused by days of exposure to the elements, was soft and well-structured, the kind of fur that spoke of quality bloodlines and expensive breeding programs. This wasn't a street dog, born to scrounging and survival. This was someone's beloved companion who had somehow become lost. Someone, somewhere, was probably searching frantically for this puppy, placing ads in newspapers, posting flyers on telephone poles, checking animal shelters with the desperate hope that their beloved pet would be returned safely. The thought made Mila's heart ache, both for the puppy's unknown family and for the little creature who had endured such hardship at such a young age. That night, Mila lay awake on her narrow daybed, listening to the puppy's soft breathing from his makeshift bed on the floor beside her. The storm continued to rage outside, rain drumming against her windows and wind howling around the building's corners. But inside her small apartment, peace reigned. She had placed a soft towel over the puppy's bed, and he had burrowed underneath it, creating a warm cocoon that reminded her of a child with a security blanket. Every few minutes, she would hear him shift position or make small sounds in his sleep, and she would lean over to check on him, ensuring he was still breathing, still warm, still safe. She had never been responsible for something so young and vulnerable, and the weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and deeply satisfying. For the first time in months, she fell asleep feeling like she had accomplished something truly meaningful, something that mattered beyond the endless cycle of work and worry that dominated her daily existence. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean and left it sparkling in the autumn sunlight. The puppy seemed much better after a night of warmth and food, his tail wagging tentatively as Mila prepared for her morning shift, his eyes brighter and more alert than they had been the night before. She had awakened to find him sitting patiently by his water bowl, as if he understood the household routine and was ready to participate in it. She couldn't take him to work, obviously, so she set up a small area in her bathroom with food, water, and the makeshift bed, along with newspapers on the floor and an old blanket for comfort. It wasn't ideal, but it was safe and warm, and she planned to check on him during her lunch break if possible. "I'll be back this afternoon," she promised, scratching behind his ears and marveling at how soft his fur was when it wasn't matted with rainwater and dirt. "Then, we'll figure out how to find your family." The morning shift at Rosie's was typically slow, a steady stream of regulars who ordered the same things every day and left predictable tips. Mila served coffee to Mrs. Patterson, who came in every morning at exactly 7:30 and ordered 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast and orange marmalade. She refilled Mr. Johnson's cup 3 times as he read every word of the local newspaper, including the obituaries and classified ads. She smiled and made small talk with the postal workers who stopped in for breakfast sandwiches before beginning their routes. But her mind kept drifting to the puppy waiting in her bathroom, wondering if he was lonely, if he was scared, if he understood that she was coming back. During her break, she used her phone to design a simple found dog flyer, describing the golden retriever puppy in as much detail as possible and including her phone number. She planned to print copies at the library and post them around town after work, though the cost of printing even 20 flyers would strain her already tight budget. Around 11 o'clock, the diner's bell chimed as a customer entered, the familiar sound that had punctuated Mila's workdays for 3 years. She looked up from wiping down the counter, ready with her standard greeting and coffee pot, but the words died in her throat when she saw the man who had just walked in. He was tall and distinguished, probably in his early 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that suggested natural aging rather than premature stress. His clothes spoke of wealth and quality, a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than Mila made in 2 months, and a watch that caught the light with the subtle gleam of real gold. But it was his bearing that truly set him apart. The way he moved with careful precision, as if every gesture required conscious thought and effort. His eyes were what captured Mila's attention most completely, though. They were dark brown, almost black, and they carried a weight of sadness that seemed to press down on his shoulders like a physical burden. This was a man who had experienced profound loss, who carried grief as a constant companion, who had learned to function in the world while bearing pain that never fully healed. He took a seat at the counter, moving with the deliberate care of someone who had recently learned that the world could change in an instant, that everything solid could become fragile without warning. His hands, when he placed them on the counter, were well manicured but bore the telltale signs of someone who had recently removed a wedding ring. The pale band of skin on his finger told a story that Mila recognized from other customers who had faced loss, the ghost of a commitment that death had ended, but love had not. When Mila approached with a menu and coffee pot, he looked up, and she was struck by the depth of loss in his gaze. There was intelligence there, and kindness, but it was all filtered through a lens of grief that colored everything he saw. "Just coffee, please," he said quietly, his voice cultured and precise, with the slight accent of someone who had traveled extensively, or perhaps grown up speaking multiple languages. "I'm not really hungry." As Mila poured his coffee, she noticed the way his hands trembled slightly, not from age or illness, but from the kind of emotional exhaustion that comes from crying too much, sleeping too little, and carrying burdens too heavy for one person to bear. She had seen it before, in the mirror during the months after her mother's death, and she recognized the signs of someone struggling to hold themselves together in public while falling apart in private. "Are you new in town?" she asked gently, her natural compassion overriding her usual professional distance. Something about this man called to the part of her that needed to help, to comfort, to offer whatever small kindness might ease another person's pain. The man nodded slowly, staring into his coffee cup as if it might contain answers to questions he was afraid to ask. "I'm looking for something I lost," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something very important to me." He paused, and Mila could see him struggling with whether to continue, whether to share his burden with a stranger, or keep it locked inside where it could continue to eat away at him. When he spoke again, his voice cracked with emotion. "Her name was Isabella. She meant everything to my life." The name hit Mila like a physical blow, and she felt her heart skip several beats as the implications began to sink in. Isabella. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Not when she had a golden retriever puppy waiting in her bathroom, a puppy that matched the description this man might give if pressed for details. "Isabella?" she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady and professional while her mind raced through possibilities. "A golden retriever puppy, 8 weeks old. She disappeared 3 days ago during the storm." His voice cracked again, and Mila could see him fighting to maintain his composure in public. "My wife passed away 2 months ago, and Isabella was all I had left of her. Elizabeth had picked her out just weeks before she—" He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't speak the word that would make his wife's death real all over again. Mila's hands trembled as she set down the coffee pot, her mind reeling with the impossibility of the coincidence and the weight of what it might mean. The puppy in her bathroom, the one she had rescued from the storm, the one she had been preparing to help find his family, might belong to this broken man sitting in front of her. "Can you describe her?" she asked, though she was already certain of the answer. The man reached into his jacket with the careful movements of someone handling something precious and pulled out his phone. The screen showed a photo that made Mila gasp audibly, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. It was unmistakably the same puppy currently sleeping in her bathroom. But in this picture, Isabella was clean and fluffy, her golden coat shining in the sunlight, wearing a small pink collar decorated with tiny hearts. But it was the setting of the photo that made Mila's eyes fill with tears. Isabella was sitting in the lap of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. A woman whose face glowed with the special joy that comes from loving something completely and unconditionally. The woman's hands were thin, almost skeletal, and a hospital bracelet was barely visible on her wrist, but her expression was one of pure happiness as she held the tiny puppy against her chest. "That's my wife, Elizabeth," the man said softly, his voice filled with love and loss in equal measure. "She rescued Isabella from a shelter the week before. She had her final treatment. She said she wanted to give me something to love when she was gone. Something that would remind me that life continues even after loss." Tears gathered in his eyes, threatening to spill over despite his obvious efforts to maintain control. "I failed her. I lost the last gift she gave me. Isabella gone out during the storm, and I've been searching for 3 days. I thought she was dead, thought I had lost the final piece of Elizabeth that I had left." Mila's heart pounded as she processed this information, as the full weight of the situation became clear. The puppy she had rescued wasn't just any lost animal. It was the final connection between a grieving widower and his beloved wife, the last tangible reminder of a love that death had tried to end but couldn't quite destroy. "Sir," she said, her voice barely steady, "I think I have Isabella." The transformation in the man's face was immediate and profound, like watching the sun break through storm clouds after days of darkness. Hope flooded his features, chasing away some of the shadows that had seemed permanently etched there, replacing despair with something that looked almost like joy. "You have her?" he whispered, his voice breaking completely now. "She's alive? She's safe?" "She's safe," Mila assured him quickly, wanting to end his torment as quickly as possible. "I found her last night during the storm, huddled behind the diner. She's at my apartment right now, warm and fed and sleeping peacefully." The man stood so quickly that his coffee cup rattled against the saucer, his composure finally cracking completely as tears began to flow freely down his cheeks. Would you be willing to take me to her? Please. I'll pay you anything. I'll do anything. I just need to see her, to know she's really safe." "Of course," Mila said, without hesitation. "Let me talk to my manager." She looked around the diner, catching Rosa's eye and beckoning her over. Rosa had been watching the interaction with obvious curiosity, recognizing the emotional intensity of the conversation even from a distance. "Rosa, I need to take an early lunch. It's an emergency." Rosa looked from Mila to the obviously distraught man at the counter, taking in his expensive clothes and desperate expression, and nodded immediately. "Go on, honey. Take all the time you need." As they prepared to leave, the man extended his hand to Mila, with formal politeness that seemed almost comical, given the circumstances. "I'm Marcus Donovan," he said, his voice still thick with emotion, "and I cannot express how grateful I am to you." The name Marcus Donovan was vaguely familiar to Mila, stirring some distant memory of newspaper headlines or magazine articles, but she couldn't place it immediately. What mattered was not who he was, but what he had lost, and what she might be able to help him recover. The drive to Mila's apartment was filled with Marcus telling her about Elizabeth and their too brief marriage, his words tumbling out in the desperate rush of someone who had been holding everything inside for too long. They had met later in life, he explained, both having focused on careers before finding love. He had been building his business empire, working 18-hour days and traveling constantly, while she had been establishing herself as an art curator, passionate about supporting emerging artists and bringing beauty into the world. Their first meeting had been at a gallery opening, where Elizabeth was presenting the work of a young sculptor whose pieces explored themes of loss and renewal. Marcus had been there reluctantly, attending only because a business associate had insisted, but he had found himself captivated not by the art, but by the woman explaining it with such passion and insight. She had made him see beauty in broken things, hope in pieces that seemed irreparably damaged. Their 3 years together had been the happiest of his life, he told Mila, as they navigated the quiet morning streets of Cedar Falls. Elizabeth had taught him to slow down, to appreciate moments, instead of always rushing toward the next goal. She had shown him that success meant nothing without someone to share it with, that all the money in the world couldn't buy the simple pleasure of waking up next to someone who loved you completely. The cancer diagnosis had come just 6 months after their wedding, aggressive and fast-moving, leaving them with precious little time to adjust to their new reality. Elizabeth had faced her illness with characteristic grace, more concerned about how Marcus would cope after she was gone than about her own suffering. "She made me promise to take care of Isabella," Marcus said, as they climbed the stairs to Mila's apartment, his voice growing quieter as they approached the moment of reunion. "She said the puppy would help me remember that love continues even after loss, that caring for something vulnerable would keep my heart from closing completely." When Mila opened her apartment door, the sound that greeted them was like music. Isabella's excited barking filling the small space, and she somehow sensed that something important was happening. The puppy had been sleeping when they arrived, but the familiar sound of Marcus's voice had awakened her instantly, and now she was crying and whimpering with excitement from her makeshift bed in the bathroom. The moment Marcus opened the bathroom door, Isabella went wild with joy, jumping and spinning in circles, her whole body wiggling with happiness as she recognized her beloved owner. Marcus dropped to his knees on the small bathroom floor, and Isabella launched herself into his arms, covering his face with kisses as he held her tight against his chest. Watching the reunion, Mila felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the raw emotion of the moment. The love between this man and the small dog was palpable, a connection that transcended species and spoke to the fundamental need for companionship that drives all living creatures. This wasn't just a man finding his lost pet. This was a grieving widower being reunited with his final link to the woman he had loved more than life itself. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion as Isabella settled in his lap, her tail wagging so hard her entire body shook. "You saved her life, and in doing so, you saved mine." As they sat in her tiny living room, Marcus shared more details about his search for Isabella, painting a picture of desperation and determination that touched Mila's heart. He had hired private investigators, he told her, professionals who specialized in finding lost pets. He had posted rewards totaling more than most people made in a year, putting up flyers in a 50-mile radius around his home. He had spent sleepless nights driving through the storm, calling Isabella's name until his voice was hoarse, checking every animal shelter and veterinary clinic in 3 counties. He had been about to expand his search to neighboring states when desperation had driven him to check every business along the route Isabella might have traveled if she had somehow gotten disoriented during the storm. Rosie's Diner had been his last stop before heading home to regroup and develop a new strategy, his last hope before admitting that he might never see Isabella again. "I almost gave up," he admitted, his hand never stopping its gentle stroking of Isabella's fur. "I thought I had failed Elizabeth completely, that I had lost the most important thing she had ever given me." As Marcus spoke, Mila found herself sharing her own story, opening up in a way that surprised her with its honesty and depth. She told him about her struggles to make ends meet, about the dreams of veterinary school that had been put on hold indefinitely due to financial constraints, about her deep love for animals that had compelled her to rescue Isabella despite her own precarious situation. Marcus listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about her background and aspirations, showing genuine interest in her life and circumstances. When she mentioned the veterinary bill she had planned to take on despite her financial situation, planning to put it on her already overextended credit card if necessary, he was visibly moved. "You would have spent money you don't have to care for a dog that wasn't even yours?" he asked, his tone suggesting that he found such selflessness both admirable and incomprehensible. "She needed help," Mila said simply, the answer seeming obvious to her. "That's what you do for creatures who can't help themselves. You don't calculate the cost, you just do what needs to be done." Marcus studied her face for a long moment, his expression thoughtful and measuring, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time. "Elizabeth would have liked you," he said finally. "She always said that you could judge a person's character by how they treated animals, especially when no one was watching." After spending 2 hours at her apartment, sharing stories and watching Isabella readjust to being with her owner, Marcus prepared to leave. The puppy seemed torn between her rescuer and her owner, running back and forth between them, as if trying to maintain connection with both the person who had saved her and the person who belonged to her. As Marcus clipped Isabella's leash, a expensive leather creation that probably cost more than Mila's monthly grocery budget, he turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, certainly, and affection, but also something deeper, more calculated, as if he were working through a complex problem in his head. "I need to ask you something," he said, his tone suddenly formal and serious, "and I hope you'll hear me out completely before you respond." Mila nodded, curious about the change in his demeanor, and slightly apprehensive about what he might be about to propose. "Elizabeth and I had planned to open an animal rescue facility," Marcus began, his words careful and measured. "We had purchased land on the outskirts of town, hired architects, and were weeks away from breaking ground when she became too ill to continue with the project. After she died, I couldn't bear to move forward with it. It felt wrong without her, like I would be betraying her memory by trying to complete something that had been so important to both of us." He paused, looking down at Isabella, who was sitting perfectly between them as if sensing the importance of the moment and wanting to be part of whatever decision was being made. "But watching you with Isabella, hearing about your dreams, and seeing your compassion in action, I think Elizabeth would have wanted the project to continue. More than that, I think she would have wanted it to be in the hands of someone who truly understands what it means to put animals first, someone who would rescue a sick puppy in a storm without thinking about the cost or inconvenience." Mila felt her heart begin to race, though she wasn't sure exactly where this conversation was heading. The tone of Marcus's voice suggested that something significant was coming, something that might change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. "I'd like to offer you a partnership," he continued, his eyes meeting hers directly. "Not just in running the facility, but in owning it. Elizabeth always said that the best way to honor love is to share it with others, to create something that will outlast your own time on earth. You shared your love with Isabella when she needed it most, when she was alone and afraid and had nowhere else to turn." The offer was so unexpected and generous that Mila struggled to process it, her mind reeling with possibilities and doubts in equal measure. "Marcus, I'm incredibly grateful for even thinking of me, but I don't have any money to invest in a partnership. I can barely afford my rent, let alone contribute to something as ambitious as an animal rescue facility." Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had seen from him, transforming his face completely and giving her a glimpse of the man he must have been before grief had settled over him like a shroud. "This isn't about money, Mila. This is about heart, and you've already proven you have more than enough of that. The facility is fully funded, has been for months. What it needs is someone with your passion and dedication to run it. Someone who will treat every animal that comes through the doors like they matter, like they deserve love and care regardless of their circumstances." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus explained his vision for what would become Elizabeth's place, painting a picture so detailed and comprehensive that Mila realized he and his wife had spent months planning every aspect of the facility. The main building would house a full-service veterinary clinic, equipped with state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, surgical suites, and recovery areas that would rival anything found in major cities. A separate building would serve as the rescue operation, with individual kennels designed for comfort rather than mere containment, play areas for dogs to exercise and socialize, and quiet spaces for cats to feel safe while awaiting adoption. But the crown jewel of the facility would be the educational center, where local schools could bring students to learn about animal care and responsibility, where potential pet owners could attend classes on proper care and training, and where the community could come together to support the welfare of animals in need. Marcus and Elizabeth had envisioned it as more than just a rescue operation. They had wanted to create a place that would change how people thought about animals, that would elevate the standard of care throughout the region. Additionally, Marcus explained, he would fund Mila's veterinary education if she was interested in pursuing that dream. He had already researched programs that would allow her to study while maintaining her responsibilities at the facility. Distance learning options combined with intensive residencies that would give her the credentials she needed without requiring her to abandon the project during its crucial early years. The conversation felt surreal to Mila, like something that happened to other people in movies or books, not to struggling waitresses in small Montana towns. That morning, she had been worried about affording groceries for the week, and now she was being offered the opportunity to own and operate a state-of-the-art animal welfare facility, complete with funding for her education and a chance to make a real difference in the lives of countless animals. But as she looked at Isabella, contentedly playing with an expensive toy that Marcus had brought from home, she began to understand that this wasn't just about her or even about the animals they would help. This was about Elizabeth's final gift, not just to her husband, but to everyone who would benefit from the facility she had envisioned. This was about love, continuing beyond death, about dreams becoming reality through the kindness of strangers who become family. "There's one condition," Marcus said, as they prepared to finalize the details that would change both their lives forever. "The facility will be called Elizabeth's Place, and there will be a memorial garden where people can remember their beloved pets who have passed on." Elizabeth would have loved knowing that her legacy would help other animals find the love and care they deserve, and that families would have a beautiful place to honor the pets they've lost. End quote. Tears flowed freely as Mila accepted the offer, her voice barely working as she tried to express gratitude for something so far beyond what she had ever imagined possible. The contracts would take time to finalize, Marcus explained, but she could start immediately. He had been ready to begin construction for months, waiting only for the right person to share Elizabeth's vision and carry it forward into reality. The legal paperwork alone took 3 weeks, during which Mila continued working at Rosie's, while spending every free moment learning about animal welfare, veterinary practices, and facility management. Marcus had provided her with an extensive library of books, journals, and online resources, and she threw herself into studying with the dedication of someone who understood that knowledge would be the foundation of everything she hoped to accomplish. During this transition period, Isabella became a regular visitor to the diner, accompanying Marcus on his daily coffee visits that had become as much about planning the facility as grieving his wife. The little golden retriever charmed every customer and employee, but she seemed to have a special affection for Mila, always running to greet her and sitting patiently by her side during breaks. Rosa watched these developments with the mixture of pride and sadness that comes from seeing someone you care about prepare to move beyond your world. "I always knew you were meant for bigger things," she told Mila one afternoon, as they watched Isabella play in the small patch of grass behind the diner. "But I'm going to miss having you around, honey. This place won't be the same without you." The emotional weight of leaving Rosie's was heavier than Mila had expected. For 3 years, the diner had been more than just a workplace. It had been her anchor in a new town, the place where she had learned to survive on her own, where she had discovered her own strength and resilience. Rosa and the other staff had become her chosen family, the people who had supported her through financial struggles and personal challenges. But as construction began on Elizabeth's Place, Mila felt the pull of destiny more strongly than the tug of nostalgia. The groundbreaking ceremony was small and private, just Marcus, Mila, Isabella, and the construction crew, but it felt monumental nonetheless. As the first shovel of earth was turned, Marcus spoke briefly about Elizabeth's dream and how it was finally becoming reality through Mila's compassion and dedication. The construction process was fascinating and overwhelming in equal measure. Mila worked closely with the architects and contractors, learning about every aspect of the facility's design and operation. The main building would house the veterinary clinic, complete with examination rooms designed to be less stressful for anxious animals. Surgical suites equipped with the latest technology, and a pharmacy that would stock everything from basic medications to specialized treatments that smaller towns rarely had access to. The separate rescue building was designed with both functionality and comfort in mind. Individual kennels were spacious and well-lit, with comfortable bedding and toys to help animals feel secure during their stay. There were separate areas for different types of animals, specialized spaces for animals recovering from surgery or illness, and quarantine facilities for new arrivals who needed medical evaluation before baths. Joining the general population. But perhaps the most innovative feature was the socialization areas, large rooms where potential adopters could spend time with animals in a comfortable, home-like setting rather than the institutional environment of traditional shelters. Marcus and Elizabeth had believed that successful adoptions required compatibility between pets and families, and these spaces would allow both to relax and interact naturally before making commitments. The memorial garden was perhaps the most beautiful feature of the entire complex. Designed around a central fountain that would provide soothing sounds and attract birds and butterflies. It included benches where visitors could sit quietly and remember their pets, walking paths lined with flowers that would bloom throughout the growing season, and small memorial stones where families could leave personalized tributes to their beloved companions. Elizabeth's own memorial would anchor the space, an elegant granite bench surrounded by her favorite flowers, roses and lavender that would perfume the air and attract the wildlife she had loved to watch. Marcus had commissioned a local artist to create a bronze plaque that would tell Elizabeth's story and explain her vision for the facility, ensuring that future visitors would understand the love and loss that had inspired its creation. During the construction phase, Mila began her veterinary technician training through an accelerated program that combined online coursework with hands-on experience at an existing clinic in a nearby city. 3 days a week, she made the hour-long drive to Prairie View Animal Hospital, where Dr. Sarah Chen, a veterinarian with 20 years of experience, had agreed to mentor her through her practical training. Dr. Chen was a small woman with an enormous presence, known throughout the region for her skill with difficult cases and her gentle manner with frightened animals. She took Mila under her wing immediately, recognizing in her the same passion for animal welfare that had driven her own career choices decades earlier. Technical knowledge is important, Dr. Chen told Mila during her first week of training. But what you can't teach is compassion, and you already have more of that than most veterinarians I know. My job is to give you the tools to use that compassion effectively. The training was intensive and demanding, requiring Mila to learn everything from basic animal anatomy to advanced surgical assistance techniques. She studied late into the night, memorizing medication dosages, learning to read X-rays, and practicing laboratory procedures until they became second nature. The theoretical knowledge was challenging enough, but the practical applications were even more demanding. Her first time assisting with surgery was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The patient was a young cat who had been hit by a car and required emergency surgery to repair internal injuries. Mila's hands shook as she prepared the surgical instruments, but Dr. Chen's calm presence and clear instructions helped her focus on the task at hand. When the surgery was successful and the cat began its recovery, Mila felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. As weeks turned into months, Mila's confidence grew, along with her knowledge. She learned to handle aggressive animals with patience and firmness, to comfort anxious owners while providing honest medical assessments, and to make life-and-death decisions under pressure. Each case taught her something new, whether it was a routine vaccination that revealed signs of underlying illness, or a complex emergency that required quick thinking and precise action. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's place was taking shape with remarkable speed. Marcus had spared no expense in ensuring the highest quality construction and equipment, and his connections in the business world had attracted some of the best contractors and suppliers in the region. The facility was being built to exceed all current standards for animal welfare, with features that many urban facilities couldn't afford to include. Isabella had appointed herself as unofficial supervisor of the construction project, arriving each morning with Marcus and spending the day exploring the growing buildings and investigating every new development. The construction workers had adopted her as their mascot, and she seemed to understand that this place was being built for her and animals like her. She would sit patiently during planning meetings, as if listening to the discussions and approving the decisions being made. 6 months after that stormy night, when Mila had found Isabella huddled behind the diner, Elizabeth's place held its grand opening. The event drew visitors from across the state, including animal welfare organizations, veterinary professionals, and elected officials who recognized the facility's potential impact on the region's approach to animal care. Marcus had insisted that Mila be the one to cut the ribbon, but she had convinced him to do it together, with Isabella between them as the inspiration for everything they had accomplished. As the ribbon fell away and the doors opened for the first time, Mila felt a profound sense of completion mixed with anticipation for all the work that lay ahead. The first day of operation brought a steady stream of visitors, from curious community members who wanted to tour the facility to families actively seeking pets to adopt. The veterinary clinic opened with several appointments already scheduled, including routine checkups for existing clients of Dr. Chen's practice, who had agreed to help establish Elizabeth's place as a trusted healthcare provider for the region. Mila's first official patient as a veterinary technician was an elderly golden retriever named Winston, brought in for a routine wellness exam by his devoted owner, Mrs. Harrison. Winston was nervous about being in a new place, but Mila's gentle manner and obvious love for animals quickly put him at ease. As she assisted Dr. Rodriguez, the veterinarian Marcus had recruited to lead the medical team, Mila felt the deep satisfaction that comes from using one's skills and passion in service of a greater purpose. The rescue operation began more gradually, starting with animals transferred from overcrowded shelters in urban areas where euthanasia rates were tragically high. Each new arrival brought its own challenges and rewards, from timid cats who needed weeks of patient socialization to bouncy puppies who required energetic volunteers to keep them exercised and entertained. One of the first rescue cases was a pregnant dog named Luna, a pit bull mix who had been found living under a bridge with no human contact for months. Luna was terrified of people and aggressive toward anyone who approached her, but Mila recognized the fear beneath the hostility and worked patiently to earn her trust. It took 3 weeks of daily visits, offering food and speaking softly without making eye contact, before Luna allowed Mila to touch her. When Luna finally gave birth to 6 healthy puppies in the safety of Elizabeth's place, Mila felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Watching the transformation from a frightened, aggressive animal to a protective but trusting mother reinforced her belief that every creature deserved a chance at happiness, regardless of their past experiences or current circumstances. The puppies became the facility's first adoption success stories, each one going to carefully screened families who had completed the educational program that Marcus and Mila had developed. The program required potential adopters to attend classes on pet care, commit to spay/neuter procedures, and agree to return the animal to Elizabeth's place if they ever became unable to care for it. Luna herself took longer to find the right home, but eventually she was adopted by a patient family with experience handling dogs with trust issues. The day Luna left Elizabeth's place, walking confidently beside her new family, Mila cried tears of joy and pride. This was what Elizabeth had envisioned: broken creatures finding healing and love through the dedication of people who refused to give up on them. As autumn turned to winter, Elizabeth's place established itself as an integral part of the community. The educational programs attracted school groups and scout troops, teaching children about responsible pet ownership and the importance of treating animals with kindness and respect. The memorial garden became a place of pilgrimage for families who had lost beloved pets, offering comfort and beauty in a setting designed specifically for remembrance and healing. Marcus remained deeply involved in the facility's operations, but Mila could see positive changes in him as the months passed. The crushing weight of grief was gradually being replaced by a sense of purpose and accomplishment. Working toward Elizabeth's dream had given him a way to honor her memory while creating something beautiful and lasting that would benefit countless animals and families. The relationship between Marcus and Mila had evolved from chance encounter to partnership to deep friendship built on shared values and mutual respect. They worked together with the easy cooperation of people who understood each other's strengths and compensated for each other's weaknesses. Marcus brought business expertise and financial resources, while Mila contributed hands-on animal knowledge and an intuitive understanding of what each creature needed to heal and thrive. Isabella, now a confident and beautiful adult dog, had become the unofficial ambassador for Elizabeth's place. She accompanied Mila on her daily rounds, seeming to sense which animals needed extra comfort and which visitors might benefit from her gentle presence. Children adored her. Anxious animals found her calming, and she had an uncanny ability to appear wherever she was needed most. 1 year after the grand opening, Elizabeth's place had facilitated over 800 adoptions, provided medical care to thousands of animals, and established itself as a model for other communities considering crow. Similar projects. The success had attracted national attention, with delegations visiting from other states to study their approach and adapt it to their own regions. But for Mila, the greatest reward remained the simplest one. Every morning when she arrived at Elizabeth's place, she was greeted by the sounds of animals who were safe, loved, and cared for. Every successful adoption reminded her that Elizabeth's vision of a world where every creature mattered was becoming reality, one family at a time. The facility had also become a teaching hospital, partnering with veterinary schools to provide hands-on experience for students while ensuring the highest level of care for their patients. Mila had been accepted into a veterinary program that would allow her to continue her education while maintaining her responsibilities at Elizabeth's place. A 5-year journey that would culminate in her becoming Dr. Mila Rodriguez, a dream that had once seemed impossible but now felt inevitable. On quiet evenings, Mila would walk through the memorial garden with Isabella beside her, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors while listening to the peaceful sounds of animals settling in for the night. The inscription on Elizabeth's memorial bench read, "Love multiplies when shared," and every day brought new proof of that truth. As she stood in the garden one evening, exactly 2 years after finding Isabella in the storm, Mila reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared, struggling waitress who had rescued a shivering puppy had become the director of a nationally recognized animal welfare facility. But more importantly, she had become part of something larger than herself, something that would continue long after she was gone. The memorial garden had grown to include dozens of stones commemorating beloved pets, each one representing a family that had found comfort in this place Elizabeth had envisioned. Local artists had contributed sculptures and wind chimes that added beauty and gentle sound to the space, creating an environment that celebrated life while acknowledging loss. Elizabeth's place had also become a research center, partnering with universities to study animal behavior, develop new treatment protocols, and advance the science of animal welfare. The data they collected was being used to improve practices at facilities across the country, multiplying their impact far beyond the animals directly under their care. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the scholarship program Marcus had established in Elizabeth's name, providing funding for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to pursue careers in veterinary, medicine, and animal welfare. The first scholarship recipients were already making their mark in the field, carrying forward the values of compassion and dedication that Elizabeth had embodied. As Dr. Mila Rodriguez completed her evening rounds, 5 years after that fateful storm, checking on the animals in their comfortable quarters and ensuring everything was secure for the night, she paused at a kennel housing a scared golden retriever mix who had been brought in that day. The dog cowered at the back of the kennel, too frightened to approach even for food, and Mila saw her younger self in that terrified creature. Sitting down outside the kennel, she began speaking softly to the frightened animal, using the same gentle voice she had perfected over years of working with traumatized creatures. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. I know you're scared, but there are people here who understand exactly how you feel, and we're going to help you learn to trust again." Slowly, drawn by the patient voice and calm presence, the dog crept forward. When she finally took a treat from Mila's outstretched hand, her tail gave the faintest wag, a sign of hope breaking through fear. In that moment, watching the beginning of another healing journey, Mila understood once again why that stormy night had changed everything. Isabella, now a senior dog with a graying muzzle but eyes still bright with intelligence and love, appeared at Mila's side, as if summoned by some invisible signal. She had retained her uncanny ability to know when and where she was needed most, and she settled beside the kennel with the practiced ease of a therapy dog who had comforted hundreds of frightened animals over the years. The scared golden retriever mix looked at Isabella through the kennel bars, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species and spoke to the universal need for connection and comfort. Slowly, the new arrival moved closer to the front of the kennel, drawn by Isabella's calm presence and obvious contentment. As Mila and Isabella sat with the frightened dog, the Memorial Gardens fountain continued its gentle bubbling, the sound mixing with the peaceful chorus of animals settling in for the night. Somewhere in the medical wing, Dr. Chen was completing a surgery that would save another life. In the adoption center, families were filling out applications to provide homes for animals ready for their forever families. In the educational building, a janitor was cleaning classrooms where tomorrow's lessons would teach children about kindness and responsibility. This was Elizabeth's true legacy, not just a building or a foundation, but a living, breathing testament to the power of love to transform the world one heart at a time. Every animal that found safety within these walls, every family that discovered a new companion, every child who learned to treat creatures with kindness, every veterinary student who found their calling here was part of a ripple effect that continued to spread outward, touching lives in ways that could never be fully measured or understood. The little puppy who had shivered in the rain had grown into a confident, loving dog who spent her days bringing comfort to others. The grieving widower had found purpose in honoring his wife's memory through service to animals in need. The struggling waitress had discovered her calling and gained the resources to pursue it. And countless animals had found the love and care they deserved, all because one stormy night, compassion had triumphed over indifference. As the years continued to pass, Elizabeth's place would grow and evolve, always adapting to meet new challenges and serve emerging needs. But its foundation would remain constant, built on the simple truth that every creature deserves love. That small acts of kindness can create profound change, and that the best way to honor those we have lost is to care for those who still need our help. In the memorial garden, Elizabeth's fountain would continue to flow, its gentle sound a reminder that love, like water, finds a way to continue its journey even when obstacles seem insurmountable. And every sunset would paint the sky with new colors, a daily reminder that endings can also be beginnings, that storms eventually pass, and that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest moments. The story that began with a waitress finding a crying dog would become legend in the animal welfare community, inspiring countless others to open their hearts and homes to creatures in need. But for those who lived it, it would always be simply the story of how love multiplied when shared, how compassion created opportunity, and how the smallest gesture on the stormiest night can change the world in ways, quote, beyond imagination.